was fantastic. And I'm thinking we'll meet again next Wednesday. I'm not 100% sure, but it looks like it.
And that's the day before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
You know that?
What is?
Next Wednesday is, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Day before Thanksgiving.
23rd.
Maybe it's
Yeah.
Oh, no, I meant the 30th.
Oh,
The
it's
30th,
after the
that
weekend.
Wednesday.
Okay, the
That's
after.
after.
After,
Week after.
November
Okay.
30th, we'll meet again.
Okay.
There's somebody's waiting for you.
They've been saving your
Where's your
chair.
seat? You're guarding your seat.
right.
Be a good girl.
Are you the last one?
No.
Okay, now, Julie, can you take a picture of the group here? Can you stand over here and take a picture of people? Is
Yes.
everybody here? Bob's not here.
No, Ellen's come get.
Bob's
here.
Yeah,
Bob's
Ellen.
here.
Oh, there's Bob. Okay.
Doreen's not here.
Doreen's right
Six right there. He's here. Just back in your hand, Doreen. Just give him the back. Nice snap. Just wrist snap. Whack.
It's like having an older brother or something, right?
He liked it. He loves it. Slap him.
Oh my God, Coco, what you doing?
Close up of Coco.
Okay, should we get started now?
Okay, yeah, we should, because it's 2 minutes past.
Okay, well, I had a series of vignettes. I kept changing my mind. I'm going to read you what these titles are, and then we'll discuss if I leave something out during my discourse, then we'll, if you have a question about it, we'll raise your hand and we'll talk about it. The original list was this time of crisis relating to the Scorpio full moon eclipse. We said that the thing that is significant about a Scorpio full moon eclipse is expect the unexpected. And we've certainly seen that. We've had that. What is it? Today's November 16th. We had an election on November 8th, 2022. Today's the 16th. What was it yesterday? The FTX, the cryptocurrency outfit went bankrupt. Really young people, guys 30 years old. His girlfriend was in charge of $32 billion.
What?
Yeah, it was just, they showed her on TV and it was frightening, man, that what's going on in the world. The guy donated $40 million to the Democrats to win the elections. Unbelievable. Time of crisis, the death of the Piscean age, the birthing of Aquarius, the esoteric purpose behind the colonization of the moon. We have a video that will show maybe on our next lecture. I think I can play it off my iPhone and we can have it here on the screen. And then I'll narrate the esoteric aspects of it. It's a beautifully animated film by NASA. And it's top notch. They show the space elevator to the moon. I mean, it's just incredible stuff. And it has a really significant esoteric meaning behind it and a purpose that the scientists aren't aware of, but will come out in the future. The other things and then I had all of those vignettes, and then I settled on, I think these three, I'm not sure about number 3, but I've got, the first one I had was astral projection. We're not talking about the techniques of astral projection, the safe techniques. We may mention them tonight, but we're not focused completely on them. But what we're talking about is the importance of astral projection and why we should do it. 2 is the origins of RNA. What is the real origin of RNA? Very esoteric subject, and falls perfectly in line with the theosophical teachings of the origins of man. The third vignette was the fifth subrace, if time allows. What's happening right now with the fifth subrace, really since World War I and World War II. So anyway, with that, I'll start off with astral projection. I was really startled yesterday. I was looking through on my iPhone, the internet, and there were how many groups there were. I counted 14 groups who are interested in or involved in astral projection and out-of-body experience, OBE, out-of-body experience. And most all of these groups had 4,000 members. And there's 14 different groups. Some of them maybe only had 300 or 400, but the majority were in the thousands of members and young people. There was a guy from Germany, I don't have his name, but he seemed to elaborate quite a bit on it. I don't know if I agreed with everything he said, but he's very involved, and that's a good thing. And he had a lot of people that were part of his organization. And it's all over the world. It's not just in America, it's all over Europe and elsewhere in the world.
Hey, David?
Yeah.
Is there something that those groups base their astral projections, theories or phenomena on?
Yeah, their own
Or the-
experiences.
Okay, so it's just personal.
They're talking about their experiences,
Mhm.
their out-of-body
Okay,
experiences.
so
The thing that's interesting,
that keeps it contemporary, you know?
yeah, we have a book here called Techniques of Astral Projection, and what is implied by the book is that there are self-motivated disciplines that you employ that are safe. They're safe. And by that we mean, yeah, you can have out-of-body experiences with drugs. That's common. It's what people are doing. They're having out-of-body. They're experiencing many times etheric vision.
Is that your dreams too?
It can be, yeah, can be.
Okay, so that's-
It's an extraordinary list of groups, and the numbers of people are really quite impressive. But anyway, yeah, a lot of people have experiences with hallucinogenic drugs. That's what it's all about. It's about experiencing the invisible worlds, whether it's the astral world or it's the etheric world, or the mental in some Devashanic state or something, or into the spiritual worlds. But usually it's astral. They're astral and they're etheric visions. Those are the really two primary things I've found over the years. So one of the things that people a lot of times ask is, what are you doing? Looking at shoes? No. No. So people ask, well, what's the benefit of astral projection? Well, the benefit of it is, it's a good question. The benefit is that there are things that you can do when you're out of body that you can't do when you're in body. When you're out of body, and one of the disciplines, and we're all disciples, DK says in the opening extracts of his books, he says that we're all disciples from the humblest aspirant up to and beyond the Christ himself. That's true. It's a very true statement. So one of the things that we do is we can do work that benefits mankind when we're in the astral world. We say, well, what kind of work? What do you do? There was a famous woman in England during World War II. She was born in 1890, died in 1946. Her name was Dion Fortune. Some of you may know about her. If you don't, you need to read her books. Extraordinary woman. Like so many of the female English mystics, extraordinary lady. But she had a group, and they were meditating and visualizing and fighting on the mental planes and in the astral, on the astral planes against the Nazis, and trying to influence the thinking of Hitler and the high-ranking Nazis to stop the bombing of England, which eventually they did. Of course, Hitler believed that the rockets were piercing the etheric body of the earth and was damaging the etheric body. And if he was going to conquer the world, he didn't want the etheric body of the world to be destroyed or perforated by rockets flying out into the atmosphere and then crashing to earth. But her group did a lot of work. This is not uncommon. When the atomic bomb was invented, the idea behind it originally, the purpose was to use it on the Nazis. And it was the spiritual hierarchy of the planet that intervened and influenced the thinking of world leaders, the Allied forces, to not use it on the Germans, who were near defeat at the time, but they decided they would use it on the Japanese. And their thinking and their decision to use it on the Japanese was influenced by a group of disciples throughout the world, and of course, members of the spiritual hierarchy themselves. And so I asked the teacher, my teacher, why that was. And he said, because the Japanese were members of the fourth root race. And that was why. But even in that answer, there's a profound meaning. And the meaning is that they had already had atomic weapons, the fourth root race, the Atlanteans. Mohenjo-Daro in Pakistan is a city that was, many scientists now believe, was destroyed thousands of years ago by some kind of an atomic device, because the rocks are melted and it would take a tremendous heat to destroy that. And the only thing that they could determine that would do that would be some kind of an atomic weapon. And of course, you have these young people, guys on TV speculating about Mohenjo-Daro and what took place there, but it makes a lot of sense. It really does. So I want to get back to this idea of what we can think, different things that we can do through astral projection, and how we can solve mysteries, and we can make sense out of the history of the planet. It's very important to have a comprehension of not only of astral projection, but projecting to the Akashic record, which is stored in the outer reaches of the astral body of the earth. That's where that information is. It's in like pockets or repositories of information, Atlantean, Lemurian. It's consolidated into these pockets that exist in the Akashic record. I've told you all the story about my projection into the Akashic record to solve the mystery of the truncated pyramid that Blavatsky talks about in The Secret Doctrine. Hi, you sneezing, puppy, little puppy. So anyway, my experience was very vivid, and the experience was that I was inside the truncated pyramid, looking out through what the scientists nowadays and the archaeologists call the what's called the Grand Gallery. But it was actually a somewhat crude, but a very workable, a very efficient telescope. And I was able, in the daylight sun outside, I'm in a very dark pyramid. They say it's the darkest place on Earth, on the surface of the Earth, is inside the pyramid, the Great Pyramid of Egypt. And what I saw when I looked out was I could see into the midnight sky, because apparently the light from outside was being absorbed by the darkness of this channel, this grand gallery. And the images of what I saw in the heavens, the stars and the planets, were reflected on a polished floor, what appeared to be polished dark granite, but also in a pool of mercury, which was like the mirror for what I was seeing in the outside. Also, I noticed that on the top of the truncated pyramid that Blavatsky talks about were etched the images of ancient astrological signs and planets on the top of the pyramid. In the very earliest stages of astrology, people used to do a square. You still see them, some people still do them. I've seen them in Europe, a square horoscope, not a round horoscope, but a square horoscope. And it is a remnant of 80,000 years ago in Egypt, when the astronomers would stand on this flat truncated surface before this pyramid was completed to the height of a capstone. That came thousands of years later by a whole different group of initiates. The pyramid went under a tremendous remodeling or redeveloping from a truncated pyramid into a pyramid that was completed to the height of a capstone. They had a gold capstone on top. It wasn't actually a stone. It was a metal framework that was gold plated. And they say you could see it from out at sea from 30 miles away. You could see the pyramid on a full moon night. You could see that gold glistening light emanating from the capstone of the pyramid. Interesting to think about. One of the amazing stories about reading the Akashic record, having externa, meaning a series of events in the life of a disciple that opened a door to understanding and explaining a mystery. So here was a mystery that my friend Dr. Baker talked about and explained one time in one of his lectures. He was trying to unravel the mystery of the sinking of the Mary Rose. And the Mary Rose was the #1 naval battleship in the world during the time of King Henry VIII. And the ship mysteriously sank on its maiden voyage, where all of the royalty of England was on the shore, and Henry was on his throne with his retinue of people and looking out, and the ship just came around the corner and it sank. And he was mortified, as you can imagine. And he forbid anybody to ever talk about it, under the penalty of death if he talked about it, because it was such an incredible embarrassment. So Baker said that he was able to go back into the Akasha, into the Akashic record, and see exactly what had happened. And he had an experience, which we call externa, in his life that was similar. It aped what had happened at the time of the sinking of the Mary Rose. He was on a troop ship coming back from World War II to South Africa. And when the ship came into port in South Africa, all of the troops went to one side of the ship to wave to their girlfriends and mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters. And when they did, the ship began to list, and they announced frantically over the intercom for everybody to spread out and move to the other side, or the ship was going to flip over. And so they did. And so anyway, he said that he was able to witness in the Akashic record a similar event that had happened with the Mary Rose, where all of the knights, the top guys of King Henry's military, were in their suits of armor, which are very heavy. They had cannons on board. This was probably the first ship of its kind with anchored cannons. And as they came around this little peninsula that went out off the coast of England, where Henry and the royalty were, they all wanted to be seen by Henry. And some of them were on their horses, and they all shifted their weight to the one side of the ship, and the ship flipped over and sank. And of course, the guys in the armor and everybody, they all drowned. They said there was nobody that survived. And it solved the mystery of the Mary Rose that nobody could ever figure out by being able to project consciously into the Akashic record and seeing it. And the added emphasis of the event was caused by the externa that he had experienced as a very young man at the end of World War II, where a similar event was potentially could have taken place, where everybody flocked to one side of the ship, and of course it threw the balance of the ship off, and the ship started to list. Things like that may not be that important, but certainly the work that is unmentioned in history, for obvious reasons, by Dion Fortune, one of the great mystics of the 19th and 20th centuries, with a group of disciples, started out with that. And then it turned into where they had opened it more or less to the public and people who were concerned, where they would have meditation groups and they would visualization groups that would help help stop the bombing of London, which was an incredible event. So we do things like that. We heal. We can be in the astral world and heal. I had a very unusual event took place here in my house. I had a lady friend who had a cat, and the cat had leukemia. And she asked me if there was anything that I knew of that could help heal her cat. And I said, well, I don't heal. It's some other force that heals. We're just vehicles for this healing force. But I'll see what I can do. That next night, I astrally projected to her apartment in downtown Royal Oak. And I saw the cat and did some things with the cat, petting the cat, talking to the cat, visualizing the cat being healthy. The lady died a year ago, last month, but the cat is still alive. It was about 4 years ago when she asked me about her cat. I feel terrible that, she died. She was an extraordinary lady, a very dear friend, a very spiritual woman. I tried to help her in the same way that I helped her cat, but to no avail. There are reasons for that. There are occult reasons for that. But it's that kind of stuff that there are also people who are healed through our work on the inner planes, through astral projection. And that's why we do it. That's the importance of astral projection. One of our lectures, I've got a really good, I've got a good video here on astral projection, and we'll play the video of the techniques and how to use the techniques. One of the very first things that you do, and it may be enough for some of you tonight to experiment with, the best time really for astral projection, I've done it full consciousness, standing up, awake, but generally it's when you're asleep or you're just getting ready to fall asleep. We say rapid relaxation is an important feature because it throws the body out of alignment. That sensation that you have, if you've ever had it, of falling while you're asleep and you feel like you're falling, it's actually your astral body coming back into your physical body. They used to, the kids back in the 1960s and in the early 70s would use a lot of hallucinogenic drugs. I went back to college after I got out of Vietnam and came home, and the kids were experimenting with acid and psilocybin and all that stuff. And of course, marijuana, which when I first experimented with it, it was 1965. And I was one of the only white kids in town that was experimenting with marijuana. And of course, when I came back from the army, everybody was smoking marijuana but me. I was done with it, you know. But they would talk about their experiences that they would have with hallucinogenic drugs and with sometimes with very powerful marijuana, types of marijuana. And it was an interesting time to listen to their stories. Some of them were very spiritual stories. They would tell these incredible stories of encounters and things that they did. It's a dangerous thing to do because it burns the filaments between the nadis, and the nadis are little chakras between the major chakras. And the filaments, they used to say back in the 60s, oh, that guy's burnt out. And to be burnt out, they didn't know what it meant, but it has a very esoteric, very spiritual connotation. And that is that the filaments are burnt out between the nadis. And it may take 3 or 4 lifetimes to reconstruct the filaments in the etheric body. I always tell kids, I have had a lot of kids at spiritual festivals come up and ask me about the mushrooms and oh, hey man, what do you think about this? And I always tell them I don't think very much about it. That you can have significant spiritual experiences that are comprehensible without drugs. Very few people who use drugs can comprehend their experiences. I have a friend with, as part of the Clairgate group. I don't know how many PhDs the guy had, 2 or 3 maybe, but 2 for sure. Went to college for 18 years straight. And he's big into ayahuasca and goes to South America with the shamans to have these experiences. And when he tells his story to me, it sounds like a lot of gibberish. He's talking about the jaguar, what the jaguar is. And of course, the jaguar is an important symbol among the South American tribes. but there are dangers in certain ways that astral projection comes about. That's what I want you to know, that there are dangerous things that happen. And one of them is the feeling, and I've experienced it before with drugs, caused by drugs, where the astral body disconnects, and when it comes back in, it doesn't connect perfectly in alignment with the physical body. Instead, it comes back like this. And it takes several days for that astral body to regain its natural position with the physical body. And you can feel it because it's like, you know, you're standing here, but you feel like you might be standing over there. You know what I mean? And that's the feeling of being your astral body being disengaged or out of alignment with the physical body. It's quite common. I think that if very highly evolved souls can experiment with hallucinogenic drugs and probably have some pretty good results. Young people messing with this stuff who don't know any of the occult or wisdom teachings, the esoteric teachings, they're not going to fare very well. They have what we call bad trips. You see a lot of people have had bad trips before.
What do you mean with bad trips? Like what?
Well, they get paranoid and they become fearful of what's happening and what they're sensing around them and what they're seeing. And I had a guy one time that he looked at his hands and he thought the skin on his hands was peeling off. Of course, it wasn't. You might have seen layers of the etheric astral bodies emanating from his aura, is what I deduced from it. But they have things like that that they can't explain. See, it scares the bejesus right out of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to be careful. And so supposedly there are guides, people that help them through these experiences. And they aren't always successful. So you have to be very, very careful. There are safe techniques, and we'll talk about those safe techniques. But like I said earlier, I digressed a little bit there, but that the whole idea of laying in bed and just relax, total relaxation. Just let yourself go. Don't be tense. Just surrender, and you'll actually throw your astral body, maybe only 2 or 3 inches. You'll throw it out of alignment. And if you can do that when you're in a state of hypnagogia, or just before the hypnagogic state, which is the state between being awake and being asleep. Hypnopompia is the opposite. It's the state, heightened awareness state, as hypnagogia is, between being asleep and being awake. There are those 2 razor thin periods of time, the hypnagogic and the hypnopompic state. If you can maintain consciousness, continuity of consciousness, and you're in the astral world, if you're able to perform the bellows breath, the bellows breath is a very important feature in astral projection and being in the astral world. And the bellows breath is simply, I'll demonstrate, where you're inhaling and exhaling as much volume of air as you can draw in and exhale. Where the nostrils will actually flare. You're drawing in prana. And if you can do that in the hypnagogic or hypnopompic state, or anywhere in between those 2 states, you're like a prize fighter in the astral world. You're empowered. you become very powerful because you're taking in a tremendous amount of prana. You're virtually Superman in the astral world. And you're through your breathing exercise. That's why the yogis always talk about breathing. And people don't understand what the breathing is really all about. It's about prana. And how do you store it? Baker had only 1/3 of a lung because his chest was blown apart in World War II. And he was listed in the military historical records as one of the most severely wounded soldiers of World War II to have ever survived. He had a hole in his back. I could stick my fist in the hole in his back. Incredible. Where the shrapnel came out. He had a 1-inch square piece of shrapnel, a 1/4 of an inch from his heart. He said he never had to take iron vitamins because the iron that was in his body from the shrapnel actually supplied his body with iron. Think of that. Ferrous, which is iron. Incredible. Well, anyway, so yeah, the breathing is a very, very important thing. And we realize that, we learn that in our astral projections, the importance of storing prana, maintaining prana. Baker said with 1/3 of a lung, he could store 1,000,000 times more prana than what I was storing. 1,000,000 times more with 1/3 of a lung. But it's in the secret of the breath. It's a very important thing to have. One of the other things is that we wanted to talk about, that I wanted to talk about tonight, is the mystery of RNA. And that we know about DNA, but we don't really maybe understand or know too much about RNA. And the esoteric teachings, new teachings, tell us that RNA was a product, or is a product, of the etheric body. That before man solidified a physical body, and before the Manasaputras, if you study theosophy or some of the other ancient wisdom teachings, there was a blending of Venusian forces with a struggling, evolving human species. This is pure theosophy. They call them Manasaputras. They are Venusian beings that lived in or on Venus, and still do perhaps in invisible forms, etheric or higher forms, mental beings. And they intermarried with a struggling human type whose brains were not allowed to develop because the skulls were growing inward. The top of the skull was caving in, crushing the brain, and they were stunted. They couldn't go any further. And so they had to intermingle with the human species, evolving human species, to radically change the evolution. This is, you'll read this in volume 2 of The Secret Doctrine, Anthropogenesis. So the origins, the occultists say, of RNA is actually when man was not yet in a physical solid body. Human beings weren't they were etheric, but they were beginning to become physical. And it's an interesting thing to think about, that eventually it solidified. The etheric solidified, the etherico-physical, a lot of times they call it, where the two are merging, or the one is, the etheric is becoming concretized and becomes physical. And so the RNA is a remnant of an early human type evolution that is probably pre-Manasuputric, if there's such a word. I think there might be a neologism I just made up. But the Manasaputras weren't in physical bodies. In fact, I don't know, did we talk about this last week? Did we talk about Easter Island?
Yeah, well, when we were in the room.
Oh, we talked about it up there,
Not,
didn't we?
not here.
Yeah, those images on Easter Island, that's a remnant. Easter Island is a remnant of Lemuria. And the island itself was a point of entrance for the Manasaputras. There were various places around the planet where the Manasaputras entered in to this volcanic world, evolving human species 18 million years ago, Blavatsky said, took place, and changed the course of human evolution by interbreeding with the human types, the struggling human types. And out of that came the DNA as the body solidified through Venusian influence. But the RNA is an early remnant of the actual human evolution when we were all in etheric bodies. It's worth thinking about. It's extraordinary. I don't know if there's anything in any of the theosophical writings that state that. Something else that's a newer teaching, but it's worth consideration. One of the things that we had mentioned on our list, I'm gonna have to put the puppy down or move her around here, is we've talked about it before, but it's worth mentioning again because it's so prevalent, this period of crisis that we're in right now. A lot of turmoil in the world. And my good friend in England and I were talking the other day, and he says he's an extraordinary astrologer and healer. He's really into esoteric healing. I'm going to try to get him here in the next couple of months to give some talks. He says that before Christmas, you'll see a radical change in the world. There'll be a series of events, he believes, that will take place. Mostly political things that will happen in the world that will just shift the thinking of the masses. And he's very positive about the future, as I am, of the future of mankind and the state of the world. We always used to say at Claregate in England, nil desperandum, do not despair. The Aquarian age, we're in the birthing process where the Piscean age is dying and the Aquarian age is being born. And it's always a period of difficulty in the birthing process. And it's a great relief once it's over with, but we're at that critical point where this birthing is in the process of happening. I would open for some questions. If anybody wants to ask a question about anything we've talked about here tonight. If there's anybody on the Zoom call, you can unmute, ask a question. We had a really interesting, after we broke up last week, we go up to the living room dining room area, and we congregate there, and we had a lot of interesting conversation. Would have been nice if we could have gotten that on film too for a Zoom lecture. But if anybody wants to ask any questions about anything we've talked about, or yeah,
I have a quick question. Are there any predictions of how long the Aquarian age will last?
yeah, it's about 2,200 years.
About 2,200 years.
Yeah, it won't fully be here for another maybe 125 years or so, but
Mhm.
it's those things, they come in gradually. The
Right,
old age
yeah.
dies out gradually. The
Yeah.
new age comes in. There's not a clean
Right.
cut delineation between this age and that age.
Mhm.
There's no such thing. It's this gradual blending of ages,
Mhm.
and
No, David, I was reading Yogalanda's book, Autobiography of the Yoga.
Yeah.
And I think it's chapter 1 or 2. Yogalanda's father worked for the railroad station. He had a very high position and he could get free railroad tickets for his family. And so one day, a young fellow who worked for his father wanted the entire week off so he could go up to the Himalayas and see his yoga.
his guru,
Yeah, his guru, yeah. And Yogalanda's father didn't believe in any of that.
yeah.
He said, "You're not turning into one of those religious fanatics, are you?" It says, "No, you can't go. You got to stay here. You got to work hard, and you got to make a life for yourself."
Mhm.
So that evening when they went home, Yogalanda's father got in a taxi cab, which was 4 guys carrying him home,
Mhm.
and he ran across a young fellow that he worked for, and he says, "Let me out here." And so they walked together, and a few minutes later, his yoga appeared right in front of him and says, he talks to him and says, "Why are you being so hard on him? He wants to go see his master."
Mhm.
He says, "You let him come."
Mhm.
And Yogalanda's father says, "I will let you go, provided you take me and my wife." And he became a follower of him too.
Yeah.
And of course, Yogalanda found his master too. He was brought up in that. Was that kind of like an astral projection? Or were he because
Where the master appeared.
he appeared and then he disappeared?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do that.
Uh-huh.
They do that. I don't think I've ever experienced that. I know people who say they have experienced it,
Uh-huh.
materializations.
Yeah.
And sometimes the very unusual for a yogi or a guru or a master to materialize their complete form. They do it.
Mhm.
But sometimes it'll just be, I had a lady, very spiritual, elderly lady. I lived with her and her husband down in South Africa for a time. And she said that the Master DK had materialized just a portion of his mouth and chin and was speaking to her. It was like, and it scared the bejesus right out of her. But she had been very dedicated.
Oh,
student. Yeah, yeah. Remember that guy on the
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it was like that.
Yeah.
So it happens in a lot of different ways. Yeah, Tracy.
Just an example of astral body projection. I think it's good if anybody's seen the movie Doctor Strange. The first one, it's a DC comic or whatever, Doctor Strange. And they show he goes to the Himalayas and
Mhm.
goes to Kamataj and meets quote unquote the master there.
Mhm.
And it's really a good, if nobody's ever seen it, it's a good rendition of how the master got knocked the body,
Mhm.
the astral body out by just a punch,
Mhm.
and his astral body was projected out.
Mhm.
And then, it's kind of good to show, like if you want to see something like that. The other thing you were talking about, good things that you can do. One of the things that he did actually in the movie was he learned to move around consciously in his astral body.
Mhm.
And so he would go down to the library at night when everybody's sleeping. He'd go in his astral body and read books.
Mhm.
And he would go through piles of books in half the time,
Mhm.
just reading them and knowing them that. But
Mhm.
they're, like you said, either reading, you could read the Akashic records.
Sure.
There's a lot you can do. I know I've had experiences with relationships, fixing relationships on the astral plane as opposed to in the physical, because it's a totally
Sure.
different atmosphere.
Yeah.
And that's huge.
Mhm.
Yeah, so there
Very
is a
good.
lot that can be done.
Yeah. Yeah, there's work, and it's part of discipleship is being competent in the astral world and being of use or of service to mankind in the astral world. You don't have the limitations that you have in the physical world. And that's very important.
I think also
Yeah.
working on the planet and everything, things like
Mhm.
working on in nature and that type of thing. There's a lot of people I think that go on in their astral bodies while they're dreaming, and actually
I
do a
believe
lot of work.
that crop circles are a sign of angelic or Davic forces expressing themselves who are about to materialize. And they're sending us messages that we don't understand, aren't able to interpret yet. But it's a precursor to the actual physical manifestation of Davic forces. And people, you tell a lot of students of, the esoteric wisdom teachings about this, and they all get real excited. But the problem is when they finally do physically materialize, how do you protect them from the imbeciles who would kill them? Who would not understand who and what they are and would murder them? How do you protect them? See, that's something that all the disciples have to think about on the planet. How do you protect them?
Massive education.
Yeah,
You'd have to
yeah,
worldwide media, whatever.
yeah. It would take some re-education of the masses to comprehend that, because people, they'll kill them. They won't understand who, they'll be afraid, And that time is coming where they'll soon materialize. There was an interesting thing that happened yesterday. I don't know if anybody caught it or not. The United Nations yesterday announced that the population of the world had reached 8 billion yesterday.
Billion babies.
United Nations, 8 billion. The occult teachings say that the planet can only sustain 10 billion. We got from 7 to 8 real fast. The teachings say that when the population gets to 10 billion, that there'll be natural catastrophes that will take place that will kill massive numbers of people. We don't relish thinking about that, but it's part of the teachings, that nature will balance itself. See, we don't know if there have ever been that many people on the planet before. Were there that many in Lemuria? Were there that many in Atlantis? See, I doubt it. I really doubt it.
But were they actually on the physical? I mean, Lemuria, was that completely physical, or was it still?
Eventually
at
it
the end of
became,
it was.
at the end it was,
Yeah.
So a lot to think about. What time is it?
Actually 8:25. We have 5 more minutes.
5 minutes.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, okay. Okay, anybody on Zoom have a question? You can unmute. Okay, well, if not, we'll call it an evening. And we'll meet again on the 30th of November. And I'll give you a breakdown on techniques of astral projection, safe ways to do it. And if you follow these steps, you'll be able to do it. And if I can do it, you can do it.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, but you have superpower, David.
no, I know.
Super David.
I know. Anybody can do it. And we're going to show really easy, safe practices that you can exercises, that you can leave your body and travel, even if it's to your basement of your house or to your library in your home or to your den or to the kitchen. We start out with baby steps and go from there.
So when
Yeah, one more question.
I just was gonna say, it reminded me a lot of Somewhere in Time
Mhm.
with Christopher Reeves. That was an
Yeah.
astral projection.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And he actually went and back and lived and became part of the Akashic record at that
Mhm.
time because.
That's right.
That was a great movie.
That was a good movie. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
what about how do you travel and then like travel internationally and then you learn other languages while you're traveling? That
Was it Mackinac?
how
I don't know.
can
Sometimes you do and sometimes you don't.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you're telepathic and there's no words. Things would get so bad in Vietnam and you would become so close with your group of guys that you were with. I'm talking about stressful situations where intuitively you knew. You didn't even have to talk. Everybody knew. They knew what the other guy was thinking. They knew what you had to do. So there
No,
are
but-
variations.
no,
of
but
that.
what I'm talking about, like for example, when my sister was so sick,
Mhm.
so she told me you came from the balcony and you talked to her in Turkish, you healed her and you left.
Who did?
You did.
I did.
You did, yeah. And she lives in Turkey and you speak Turkish.
Wow.
So how did you do that, for example? Can you teach that too?
I have no memory of it.
No?
But see, that's not uncommon either. That you can't, sometimes your memory is erased for safety reasons.
Yeah, she's just, give her some instructions. And
Her sister is a big fan of mine and likes me, and we've helped her a lot.
yeah, because you communicate with her somehow
Mhm,
directly.
mhm,
You're always traveling,
mhm,
telling her stuff.
mhm. Your sister says,
Yeah, my
Mhm.
sister says.
yeah.
You tell her things like it's amazing.
Yeah.
And then you tell me something.
See, here's a possibility though, too, of the way these things happen. Her sister thinks I'm some sort of a special guy or something.
Swami.
But yeah, but it's not me, it's probably somebody else. But she visualizes me because I'm the only person she knows that talks about this kind of stuff. So it's not me.
No, it's
It's-
you.
It's
Nah.
her image of me. That's all. Yeah.
No, it's him.
Well, maybe you just lost all memory of it.
Yeah, it could
that
be,
you
but
went there.
yeah, maybe. Okay, well, listen.
Oh, I was on vacation, David, over like in Montenegro area up in the mountains. And it was like an atomic blast had hit this mountain of rock and it was like glazed.
Mhm,
You couldn't even pick a part of it off. It was just
Mhm.
glazed in there.
Hmm.
And it must have been some type of atomic blast or something from the past
mhm.
that did that.
Yeah. And it was in Montenegro.
in that area,
Mhm.
Montenegro means Black Mountain.
Mhm.
And that whole area has some usual formations in it.
Hmm.
Like Bosnia, the pyramids
Mhm.
over there.
Mhm. Yeah, I like to talk about the Bosnian pyramids sometimes. I have my own ideas about that. And I met the guy that discovered them. And we had a conversation about them. But there's a really interesting history, I believe, behind the pyramids, the Bosnian pyramids, and it's worth discussing. And that would make a really interesting evening lecture. Okay, well, let's call it a night.
Okay, all right. Good night, everybody.
Thank you, David.
Is it off?
I'm turning off.